All right, here's a topic that both Congress and the president agree on. Imagine that. Designating Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. So joining us to discuss this recent decision, our political panel for the day, we have Maliha Khan. She's the co-chair of Muslims for Progressive Values. And, of course, we have conservative commentator Steve Malzberg from our New York studio. All right, ladies and gents, first, let me take you back a little bit in history here. First, Hosni Mubarak was the president of Egypt, the leader of Egypt for decades. He was aided and installed by the U.S. Mubarak was later essentially overthrown from office, again by the U.S. as well in 2011 in favor of, what we called free and fair elections. So then the Egyptian people elected Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was in office briefly, but then the U.S. didn't like the results of that election, so now Egypt is with el-Sisi. Maliha, I'll start with you. Given this history with the U.S. intervening in Egypt's affairs, how do you view this recent move to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terror group?
Hi, I'd like to first thank you for having me on the show. Now, this current issue of designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization is interesting because of really who's calling for it. And right now we see Sisi pushing the U.S. administration to make this move. And Sisi is a tyrant who is widely known for his numerous human rights abuses. And this appears to be an effort on his part to consolidate power by neutralizing a political rival. Now, that's not to say that the Muslim Brotherhood is not problematic. In fact, the Muslim Brotherhood has a very problematic history. And even though they have distanced themselves from violence, the ideology that they continue to propagate is based on intolerance. So the fact remains that we, society at large, do need to address this organization, do need to counter their narratives and their ideology. But I think the question really comes down to how we go about doing that, and it's whether we go through this through a political mechanism, so like a top-down approach, or we go through a societal mechanism focusing on grassroots level work, changing the hearts and minds of people on the ground, not only in Egypt, but across the Middle East and the Muslim world, more broadly speaking. That's exactly the kind of work that Muslims for Progressive Values is doing. And, we've seen throughout history, and more recently so, many governments try to tackle issues of fundamentalism through war, through economic sanctions, a variety of other political channels. But none of these have really resulted in true lasting change. So I think we need to take a more holistic approach and focus on countering the narratives and the ideology that's at the root cause of this kind of fundamentalism and this intolerance that we continue to see in organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood. Definitely
a very comprehensive look at what's going on with this new designation or soon-to-be designation. Steve, I know you've got a hot take on this.
Well, what took us so long? Syria declared the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization in 1980. Russia banned them in 2003 and designated them in 2006. Egypt, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and by the way, the United Arab Emirates also designated CARE, the the Muslim American Society, MAS, and a Union of Islamic Organizations in France. This according to Counter Extremism Project as terror organizations as well. Look, the other guest says that they don't favor violence. They spawned Hamas, and they openly and with vigor support Hamas, blowing up terrorists, killing civilians as a legitimate form of resistance. Ayman al-Zawahiri is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's the head of al-Qaeda. So to say that they shun violence is not true. They're a whole network, and they try to plant themselves in countries and propagate Sharia law and taking over the country with Sharia law. So they're a very smart organization, but at their core, they support violence when they think that violence is going to do the trick.
Now, Maliha, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded back in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna. It was intended to be a social and political movement to spread the good works of Muslims and to spread the true values of the Muslim belief. Would you say that it's kind of been co-opted because it became political, that it has incited some violence somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, as I started my talk by accepting the fact that Muslim Brotherhood has a, violent, problematic past, there's no doubt to that. But like you said, it has been co-opted. Its essential early goals by the founders have been co-opted, and we can now see there are dozens of offshoots. There are organizations around the world that either will take on the name Muslim Brotherhood, some without the name officially, but continue to still have affiliations. And some are very problematic, some are not so much. You've got charitable organizations who will say they're affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they do nothing that's violent in nature or problematic, in my opinion. But I think the broader thing that we need to look at really is going back to your early point about U.S. intervention. We look and we our goal is to see democracy flourish in the Middle East, and every time we see a version of that democracy, we are unsatisfied with it, and then we want to find some way to replace whatever that version may be. And I understand it's not perfect, we need to work on it, but you do have to admit that the Muslim Brotherhood is a democratic counter-narrative to Sisi. And the people that are pushing for, the governments that are pushing for this terrorism designation aren't the greatest either. You look at Saudi Arabia, I mean, they have the most horrendous track record when it comes to human rights. So we need to, it's a little rich coming from them, right?
Yeah,
we need to take that with a grain of salt.
Steve, she has a point there. I mean, the Saudis are really pushing for this because when you get designated a terror organization, like Trump just did with the IRGC, there comes with financial
sanctions.
Yes, there are big sanctions at stake here and diplomatic problems. So how do you deal with this when the Muslim Brotherhood is 1 million man strong, and I'm sure women too, 1 million man strong across the Middle East?
Well, I mean, you don't sacrifice the interests of the United States and the safety of the United States because there's too many of the bad guys. Again, what Donald Trump is doing here is looking out for the safety of the United States. And the Saudis and the Egyptians and all the other countries that banned them, they're just afraid of being taken over by the Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law. That's the whole goal of the Muslim Brotherhood. And again, they sanction violence when they feel it helps their purposes, like through Hamas. My biggest fear is, the Congress will have to approve this. They have 7 days once the Secretary of State declares it. Then the Muslim Brotherhood has 30 days to go to court and fight it. Now, what if you find a liberal judge and he sides with them and says they're not a terrorist group? Then you got all kinds of problems. That's my biggest fear, to be honest with you. But, this excuse that it's going to radicalize Muslims and inflame Muslims and be a recruiting tool. We heard that when, we can't have Gitmo, same reason. You can't call it Islamic terrorism, same reason. Enough with the excuses. Call it what it is. All
right, Maliha, you're our guest. I want to give you the last word here. Where do we draw the line between a political movement and a terror organization? I'd like for you to draw that distinction for a lot of people that might conflate the two.
Sure. I think it's a simple distinction that comes down to their actions being violent or not, right? You can have all sorts of political opinions, but if you're resorting to violence, that's when it becomes a terrorist organization, in my opinion. But to Steve's point, he talked about Sharia law, and I would like to ask, what form of government do you see in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? I mean, that's purely theocratic. So if you're worried about Sharia law, I'd be concerned about it coming from Saudi Arabia, not so much from other places.
All right, we've got to leave it right there, folks. She brought up a fair point. Saudi Arabia, as we know, just executed like 37 people last week. So we don't want that coming to the U.S. either. So we will leave it right there, ladies and gents. Steve Malzberg and Maliha Khan, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.